In a bustling city where skyscrapers touched the clouds and people hurried past without noticing the shadows of life, a young beggar girl found something extraordinary, a millionaire's credit card. But what she asked for in return wasn't riches or luxury, it was something far more powerful, something that shattered the millionaire's heart and brought tears to his eyes. Title: A little beggar found the millionaire's unlimited credit card. What she asked for in return made him cry. The streets were her home, the cold pavement her bed. Reina, a small girl of around 10, had grown accustomed to the unkind stares of strangers, the whispers of pity, and the empty promises of help. Her face, although covered in grime, had a certain glow of innocence. She had been orphaned at a young age, left to fend for herself in a world that had forgotten her existence. Every day, she sat on the corner of the busiest street in the city, holding a tin cup, hoping for some spare change from passing strangers. Reina was clever, though. She knew how to blend in, how to move unnoticed through the city. She didn't steal or pickpocket. Instead, she relied on small acts of kindness from those few who bothered to stop. Life was hard, but it was all she had ever known. One chilly evening, as the wind howled and the city's lights flickered in the twilight, something strange happened. Amidst the crowd, a man in a tailored suit rushed past Reina, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. He was clearly a man of wealth, his polished shoes gleaming and his watch catching the light. But in his haste, something slipped from his pocket, a shiny, black credit card. Reina, unnoticed as usual, saw it fall and quickly picked it up. She didn't know much about such things, but the card had a name on it, Vincent Grayson. The name didn't mean anything to her, but the sleek, expensive look of the card told her it belonged to someone important. Her first instinct was to hand it in, but as she clutched the card in her hand, something stopped her. What if this was her one chance to change her life? She had heard stories of people using lost credit cards to buy food, clothes, and even a way out of the streets. Still, Reina hesitated. She wasn't a thief. But the gnawing hunger in her belly and the desperation of her situation clouded her judgment. That night, instead of returning the card, Reina decided to hold on to it, just for a little while. She would return it, she told herself. But first, she would see what it could do. Vincent Grayson was a self-made millionaire. Born into a modest family, he had worked his way up the corporate ladder, building an empire of wealth and success. But with each rung he climbed, something inside him had hardened. The softer parts of his humanity were replaced by ambition, greed, and a desire for power. He had everything, luxury cars, a penthouse, a private jet, but inside, he was empty. His marriage had failed years ago, and the only family he had left was a distant daughter who resented him for putting his career before her. To Vincent, money was the solution to all problems. If someone was unhappy, they simply didn't have enough of it. But deep down, he knew this wasn't true, though he buried that truth under layers of work and material possessions. The next morning, Reina found herself standing outside a large supermarket. Her stomach growled as she stared at the food displays inside. She knew the credit card could get her anything she wanted, but would it work for someone like her? She felt the weight of it in her pocket and finally made up her mind. She walked inside, filled her cart with food, warm clothes, and even a pair of shoes that fit her tiny, blistered feet. At the register, her heart pounded in her chest as she handed over the card. The cashier, without a second glance, swiped it, and the screen blinked with approval. Raina felt a surge of disbelief. It worked. It actually worked. But instead of feeling elated, Raina felt a strange pang of guilt. She didn't want to live her life by stealing from others, even if it was just a rich man who wouldn't miss the money. After gathering her things, she made a decision: she would find Vincent Grayson and return the card. She had taken what she needed to survive for a few days, and that was enough. Tracking Vincent down wasn't difficult. His name was all over the news and business websites. He was a public figure, celebrated for his success in the financial world. Raina, with her street smarts, found his office building in the heart of the city's financial district. It was an intimidating place, full of polished marble and glass. Raina walked through the grand doors, feeling out of place as people stared at her ragged clothes. The receptionist looked at her with suspicion, but when Raina mentioned Vincent's lost credit card, the woman's eyes widened, and soon enough, Raina found herself being led to his office. Vincent Grayson was on the phone when Raina entered his vast, luxurious office. He didn't look up at first, dismissing her presence entirely. When he finally glanced her way, his eyes narrowed in confusion. "What's this about?" he asked, his tone brusque. Raina stepped forward, holding out the card. "I think this belongs to you, sir." Vincent's eyes darted to the card, then back to the girl. "You found this?" His voice softened, but there was still a sharp edge to it. Raina nodded, explaining how she had picked it up and how she had used it to buy food and clothes. "I'm sorry for using it. I didn't want to steal. I needed something to eat." For a moment, Vincent was silent, staring at the small girl in front of him. Her words struck a chord deep inside him. She had returned the card when she could have drained it dry, could have vanished into the streets forever. But instead, she stood here, apologizing for taking what was barely a dent in his wealth. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Raina said, "I don't want money or clothes. I don't want anything you can buy with that card. I just want something else." Vincent's brow furrowed. "What is it you want?" Raina hesitated, looking down at the floor. Her voice cracked as she spoke. I want a family." Vincent's heart stopped. Of all the things he had expected, this was not one of them. A family? The words echoed in his mind, and for the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him, a deep, aching sadness. Raina's request shook Vincent to his core. He had been prepared to offer her money, a place to stay, maybe even a scholarship. But a family? That was something he couldn't buy, something he had failed to maintain in his own life. He tried to explain that he wasn't the right person to help her with that. He told her he wasn't good with people, that he didn't know how to be part of a family anymore. But Raina, with her wide, hopeful eyes, simply asked, "Can't you try?" The question lingered in the air like a challenge. Vincent was conflicted. He had built his life around money and success, around the idea that wealth could fix anything. But standing in front of him was a little girl who had no interest in his fortune, no desire for the material world. All she wanted was something Vincent had lost long ago, a connection, a sense of belonging. Torn between his instinct to push people away and a growing desire to help, Vincent agreed to let Raina stay with him for a while. He told himself it was temporary, that he was just giving her a chance until something better came along for her. But deep down, he knew this was about more than just helping a stranger. As the days passed, Reina's presence in Vincent's life began to change him. She was curious about everything, his work, his life, the city around them. She asked him questions no one else ever had, questions that forced him to reflect on his choices, his past, and his loneliness. But just as things seemed to be improving, a conflict arose. Vincent's estranged daughter, Claire, found out about Reina. She had never forgiven her father for abandoning their family in pursuit of his career, and now, seeing him take in a child, stirred up old wounds. Claire confronted Vincent, accusing him of trying to replace her with this new girl. The argument between father and daughter was intense, filled with years of unspoken resentment and pain. Vincent, who had always prided himself on being in control, found himself helpless in the face of his daughter's anger. He didn't know how to fix things with Claire, and now he feared he was failing Reina too. The tension between Vincent, Claire, and Reina reached a breaking point when Reina, overhearing one of their heated arguments, decided to run away. She didn't want to be the cause of more pain in Vincent's life, and she believed that perhaps he was better off without her. For days, Vincent searched for Reina, his heart heavy with regret. He had grown to care for her, more than he had realized, and her absence left a gaping hole in his life. He thought about all the mistakes he had made, not just with Reina, but with Claire, and how he had pushed people away in his pursuit of success. It was during this time that Vincent had an epiphany. He realized that money could never fill the emptiness inside him, that all the wealth in the world couldn't replace the love and connection he had lost. He had spent so much time chasing material success that he had forgotten what truly mattered. Vincent eventually found Reina in the very place he had first met her, on the streets, sitting alone with her tin cup. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes, but before she could say a word, Vincent knelt down and hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry for everything." Reina, sobbing into his chest, forgave him. She didn't need an explanation or promises of wealth. All she had ever wanted was someone to care for her, someone to call family. In the days that followed, Vincent worked to repair his relationship with Claire. It wasn't easy, and there were many painful conversations, but slowly, they began to rebuild what had been broken. Claire, seeing the change in her father, started to let go of her resentment. She even began to bond with Reina, the two forming an unlikely but strong connection. Vincent's life, once centered around money and power, was now focused on something far more important: love, family, and the connections that made life meaningful. He learned that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the people you care for and the relationships you nurture. Reina, once a little beggar with nothing to her name, had found what she had always dreamed of, a family. And in return, she had given Vincent the one thing he had been missing all his life, a reason to live beyond the pursuit of success. The story ends not with riches or grand gestures, but with something far more valuable: the simple joy of sitting around a dinner table, sharing a meal, laughing, and knowing that, for the first time in a long time, they were not alone.